Welcome to the Discover Alaska Lecture Series, brought to you by the University of Alaska Fairbanks Summer Sessions and Lifelong Learning. My name is Althea St. Martin, and I will be your host for this summer's series. Discover Alaska is in its 15th season and previously was held on the UAF campus. The COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing guidelines required that we rethink the format for the series this summer. We are delighted that KUAC has agreed to support this new format as a weekly TV broadcast. Thank you, KUAC. Each Wednesday night over the course of the summer, KUAC will air a talk by a local community member on a range of Alaskan topics. We're grateful to our speakers who are incredibly flexible in adjusting to this new format, and we appreciate the time they are donating to help us all learn more about our great state. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I wanted to let you know that you can view the talks online later by going to UAF Summer Sessions website at uaf.edu/summer/events. I'm pleased to introduce tonight's program, Fairbanks Then and Now, a time travel journey. This unique historical show is a collaborative production by longtime Fairbanks residents Mark Cosson and Joan Skilbred. Mark has a background in video production and for many years was a video producer at KTVF and KUAC. All of the drone footage in this show was produced by Mark. Joan is well known for compiling and sharing the rich history of Fairbanks and Alaska by doing entertaining historical presentations for the past several years. These two creative individuals teamed up to produce a show that will let the past blend with the present right before your eyes, using a technique called rephotography. This intriguing show will let you see Fairbanks and the surrounding communities of the interior in a whole new way, giving you an appreciation for our local history through their captivating imagery. We're fortunate to have Joan here with us tonight to take us on this time travel journey.
Thank you for this opportunity to share some of Fairbanks' history with you. This presentation is really heavy on images, and I hope that you will really enjoy this. It's going to be a bit of a time travel experience. We're going to use a technique that is called rephotography. And what the heck is that? Well, rephotography is where you take an old photo and you take modern camera equipment and you go out and try to retake that photo today from the same angle, and then you have something that's comparable then and now. Easier said than done if you've ever tried it. So to start this, we're going to go with an image of downtown Fairbanks circa 1930s. And in this image you see the Chena River, you see the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Avenues from Cushman Street east, and there's a lot of buildings in it, a couple of cars, and to the today image. So we'll go ahead and bring up the old image, and then we'll have it dissolve into the new image. And you can see that an awful lot has changed. Some things are still the same. The federal building is still there on Cushman Street, and so is the Catholic Church. But everything else in this photo has pretty much changed to modern parking lots and buildings. Finally, we have a combined image of both, where the old is centered with the new around it. And that makes for an interesting look, so you can kind of see them together in a unique way. So the next one is going downtown on 2nd Avenue in Fairbanks in the 1950s, and 2nd Avenue was a busy, busy place in those days. Everything was on 2nd Avenue. The News Miner was there, Monzi's Pantorium Cleaners, the Empress Theater, the Lacey Street Theater, they were all there. And next to it we have today's picture. So we'll go ahead and bring up the old one big and so we can do the dissolve. And as you can see, some of it is still there, a lot of it is not. Our buildings are taller and we have more pavement. And here we have the combined image. And I like this because the old car and what was is framed by the new, taller, bigger buildings that are more modern. So now we're going to do it the reverse way with the old buildings along the outside, and we're going to put this modern view of a camper coming down the street from the future into the past. So the next slide is downtown Fairbanks in the 1940s, and this is on Cushman Street near the bridge looking over towards the Federal Building. In the modern view, you can see that the street is a lot wider, there's a lot more pavement, but the Federal Building is still there. And in this image, we're going to do it the reverse way. And we're putting the new framed with the old. These make for very interesting images. So now we're just going to step around the corner between the Aurora Energy Building and the Federal Building on the corner of Cushman and 2nd. And looking east down 2nd Avenue, we have two images, the then and the now. And on this, you can see that 2nd Avenue was a bustling place. As we dissolve it to today, you'll notice it's not so busy, but part of that is to take images in the streets of downtown Fairbanks. We went out early on a Sunday morning, and you can see there's some construction going on as well. I like how, as it goes back, you notice the traffic lights have changed. There's always been a sign on the corner of 2nd Avenue and Cushman Street, and this shows two versions. Today we have the Key Bank sign. The old one is the First National Bank sign that says minus 54 degrees. While doing this, we had to get a little creative. We had to stand up on some unusual places. You see Mark here on a post. And there's a selfie of Mark and I. He took this with the drone when we were doing some of the downtown shots. And these three gentlemen in the photo on the right are the three amigos. And when they saw me out in the street with the big camera taking the pictures, they thought I was with National Geographic, and they begged me to please make sure that I was in the article. So I obliged. So now we're going to move to the Clay Street Cemetery. The Clay Street Cemetery is one of the oldest things that we have in Fairbanks. The graves go all the way back to 1903 when Al Foster died. And the cemetery site was selected, and he was the first burial there. So on the left we have an image taken from 1910, and then today's image. And so now we'll go ahead and do the dissolve from today, and we're going to go backwards and just watch right there in the middle of the image, and you will see that it looks like there's a lot of things missing in the cemetery, and that's because everything in the cemetery at that time was made of wood, and subsequent floods over the years and rot have washed away all of those grave fences and wooden grave markers. So now you see the old image again with the Chena River running up in the background, and the Steese Highway today, the expressway runs off to the right of the picture. So you can even do this with smaller items. And now we're going to do this with individual graves located in the cemetery. And here we see the image of E. Walker Fox's grave. He died on March 29th, 1906. And this woman and baby, I would assume, are probably his wife and child. And they were visiting the grave. And I had my friend Erica Miller pose in the exact spot. We located his grave in the cemetery. And here you see a morphed image of the two together. Going back to the old picture, you can see that those trees are absent in 1907. So now we're looking at Franz Giebel's grave, taken around, I'm guessing, 1915. And Franz died in a snowstorm at Jos. So the important thing here is to notice the big spruce trees in the background. And as it goes back out again and changes, you will see that those trees were in this picture taken from around 1915. They were much smaller than they are today. But they're still there. And finally, we're going to do Benjamin Patton's grave. Benjamin Patton is one of a couple of Civil War veterans that are buried in the Clay Street Cemetery. Today, there's nothing there to really mark his grave. And as we go back to what it did look like, you can see the woman standing at the fence of his grave. Next to her is another fence, and there's a purse hanging on that fence, the corner post. And sticking up out of that grave fence is the tips of a little spruce tree. Now, as I dissolve it back out, look at the tree next to my friend Erica. So next we're going to go down Front Street to St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. This photo was taken probably around 1910, and you can see the old church and the new church. St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, this original building burned, I believe, in the 30s, and they rebuilt the building that's there today, and it has roughly the same footprint and the same outline, so we were able to use it for this. To the right of the old church was St. Matthew's Hospital. It was the second hospital in Fairbanks, and it closed in 1915 when St. Joseph's stole all the business. So now we're going to go to today, and you can see there's a bit of change there. And clicking once again, I have the morphed image, and you can see that Mark is halfway the guy from the past and halfway the man of the future. And then we can do it back the other way, where the present is in the middle of the picture surrounded by the past. So on the corner of Cowles and First Avenue is the George Thomas Public Library, which is still for sale. You can buy it if you want. The original picture I have is from 1910. I believe this picture was the opening of the library, and standing in the center on the steps is the Reverend Bedisher from the Episcopal Church. And I had Mark stand in that same spot, and as it goes to today, you'll see Mark. Now we go back out, and it goes back to the past with a blended image. Right behind the library was a very attractive Fairbanks home. It was the home of Frank and Delia Dunham, and it's where the credit union parking lot is today. In the background, you can see the library in these two images. So now we have an image that shows the Thomas Library and the Dunham House, and a very famous picture of Fairbanks with a line of cars, and they're all filled with baseball players and spectators on their way to the game. And most people think that this photo was taken along First Avenue, but actually it was taken on Cowles Street, and I know that because the Dunham House is there. So I have the then picture and the now picture side by side, and you can see how it's changed today. The Dunham House is all gone. You can see the parking lot there, and the street's wider. But the Thomas Library is still there. And so here's the blended version of both together. So turning and looking east from that same vantage point on the corner of 2nd and Cowles, you can see the back of the Oddfellows Hall, which is today a antique store. And you can see the house that sits behind it that has, it's a good example of a Fairbanks collector. And you can see the clothes are hanging on the line, and all the nice flowers and landscaping that the Dunhams did. It looks a lot better. With the morphed image, you can see that the house is still the same. The yard's filled with stuff, and the Oddfellows Hall is still standing. The next photo is the Gibson House, located on First Avenue during the 1950s. I call it the Gibson House because my friend Mike Gibson lived in there. And this house was built in 1917. It sits down near the power plant, and it's one of the prettier old homes in Fairbanks. And now I'm going to dissolve into the picture of Mike and his dad, who was a police officer here in Fairbanks when he was a little boy, taken right there. This image shows the Fairbanks waterfront looking east from Cushman Street around 1925. And you can see that they widened. They were widening First Avenue, and they were using a lot of fill. They used scrap wood, garbage, whatever they could get to dump in and to shore up the waterfront from the riverboat traffic, which went away after the railroad came. But looking along there, you can see the Pioneer Hotel, you can see the Masonic Hall, the Oddfellows Hall building is still there, but most of the rest of it is gone now. So now we're going to use an aerial shot that was taken around 1904. It's a very early picture of Fairbanks. There's 3 steamers tied up at the bank. And we used a drone shot of roughly the same spot. And then here is the image combined, which looks very interesting, seeing those river boats plopped right in the middle of all of our modern infrastructure. Now we're going to do a panoramic photo that was taken at 1st and Wickersham Street on August 3rd, 1904. And here is the photo taken today, so you can kind of see how things line up. Everything in the photo of the original is gone. And now here's the image where the two are merged together. And the Pioneer Saloon was where the building is on the corner of Wickersham and First. The Hotel Northern shows faintly up in front of the Bridgewater. And there's a lot of supplies on the riverbank. Those supplies were boilers, rolled tar roofing paper, pipe. There's a stove in there. There's an interesting assortment of goods that had been taken off, loaded off of the river boats, waiting to go to the creeks. So the next image is the Turner Street Bridge right around 1905. Today we have the Cushman Street Bridge, and in a few years ago we had the Memorial Bridge that crosses from Illinois to Barnett Street. But for many years the bridge was on Turner Street, which was in between there, roughly right through the Key Bank parking lot. So you see the two side by side. The 1905 image. This was before the Great Fire of Fairbanks, and the hotel is in the background on the corner of Cushman and First is where the fire started. So you see them bringing the pack trains headed to the creeks with supplies crossing the bridge. So now we'll blend the two images together, and you can see how they were in relation to one another. So next we have a panorama of Fairbanks looking south, taken the summer of 1904, and then we're going to lay over it and morph into 1905. And you can see that there's been a tremendous amount of growth in the city during that year. Now we're going to bring it today, but it's a combined image, and I really like the way that this looks with the people from 1905 on the north bank of the river looking at the modern city of Fairbanks. And here's another image of downtown Fairbanks looking south. And it makes for an interesting comparison. We've grown a lot. Now we're going to go roughly from the area where the antique store is on the corner of First and Cowles, and we're going to look north to Garden Island. And this photo was taken July of 1904. And today you see that the Borough building is there, and the old Dominion Commercial Company is there, and we can see the bridge. A lot has changed. And now it's all the way to today. Next, we're going to look at the area of Illinois and many streets. And the images, the original image is from 1910, and it was taken in an early airplane flight of Fairbanks. Fred G. Noyes was one of the wealthier residents of the town. He took the picture, and we used the drone to recreate it, and a lot has changed. You can see, as we go to look closer at the original image, you can see the Noyes house that sits today on the corner of Illinois and many streets by the funeral home. And you can see some buildings in the distance, and that's where Golden Valley's offices sit today. In the field, in the upper left corner, that was later turned into the Fairbanks baseball fields, and they had baseball games and races and all kinds of stuff there. So dissolving and putting today's image in the middle of it, you can see how some things have changed. The Noyes house is still there, and you can see the FE Company office building, which was built later. And now we're going to take that image again and lay over the bigger modern image with the old in the middle. And you can see how everything has grown and changed all around there. So the Noyes house, when you look at these two images, you can see that it used to have a third story. In 1963, there was a fire in the house, and they had to take the upper story off. So the house is still basically the same, it's just missing the top. To the right, in the original image, you can see the water tower. They had running water. blending these two images into one image, you will see that I got a 1 in a million shot when I took this photo, and I do not think that I could ever get this well lined up ever again. You see the people sitting, from the old photo, are sitting in a Jeep. That old car today is at the Fountainhead Antique Auto Museum and still runs. So here we see another image of the Noyes House, and we see the Tanana Valley Railroad locomotive number 4. This car was for their admin use and general running around town for supplies, but it was called locomotive number 4, and it's the only picture I've ever seen of this vehicle. And now it will dissolve out to today. Looks kind of sad. And back in with a morphed image of the two. Moving down the street to the FE Company admin building, which was restored, and they did a great job on that. The Pioneer Museum has photographs of that building under construction, so we thought that it would be kind of interesting to feature that. So you see the two photos here together. This building was constructed in the 1920s. And you can see it under construction. You can see the Noyes House in the background. Now we're going to dissolve to today. And you see the finished building about 100 years later. And you can see it has an addition put on it. And now we'll bring back up part of the old image, so it's a blended image, which looks kind of interesting. Here's another angle of it under construction. And then merging the two images together again. A lot has changed. Now we're going to move down to Denali Park. Denali Park was called McKinley. And it was McKinley Park, and the mountain was called McKinley. And so on these images, I went with the original labels. So here we see the McKinley Park Post Office in the late 1920s. And they were just building stuff up there, so they took old boxcars and repurposed them, and the post office was in an old railroad boxcar off of the railroad siding there. Now we see two images side by side of the railroad depot down there at the park. It's in the same place today as it was. In the 50s, they took out that old depot and they built the McKinley Park Hotel. And here we see a side-by-side with the image of the hotel shortly after it was built and today's modern depot. And we bring up the original of the McKinley Park Hotel. And you can see that there's a cart with a lot of suitcases on it. And those carts are at the depot today on display. This is looking from another vantage point there at the depot, and you see the then and the now. And we tried to recreate this man who was standing on the railroad siding with the train car next to him. So here's the original photo. And you see him standing looking at the ground. Of course, everybody that goes to the railroad depot, you live for the train to arrive. So we did a then and now of that. So here you see the two images side by side. We'll bring up the old image, taken in the 50s. And we'll do the dissolve to today in the same spot. Same tracks, same mountains, different locomotive. Just past the depot, when you're headed south, is the Riley Creek Bridge. And this side-by-side photo shows part of that bridge and the old Merino Roadhouse that was taken, I think, around the 1950s. So they're side by side. All that's left is the bridge, which you can barely see peeking through the trees. The Riley Creek Bridge was built in January of 1922. And these two images show the bridge and the construction camp for the workers that built the bridge. So we have the two images together. This construction camp was a town unto itself. It had everything but saloons and bordellos, which were located on the opposite side of the creek and downstream a little bit from where this picture was taken. You can see the bridge is under construction. And this looks like a photo that was probably taken January of 1922 when they ran the steam crane across the bridge for the first time. And it will dissolve to today. The bridge is there, everything else is gone. The next photo shows from up top as you come to the Riley Creek Bridge. And in these side-by-side comparison, you will see the man standing in the original, and I have Mark standing in the today shot. The trestle work doesn't look the same. It looks like it's missing in the today shot, and that's because to preserve the integrity of the trestle work, the Alaska Railroad later went in and filled in with gravel ballast. So all that trestle work is still there under that gravel roadbed. And this image shows a better view of that trestle work as it leads up for the bridge itself. So finally, for Riley Creek, we had to go down and get the train coming over the bridge. So here you see the steam locomotive crossing the bridge in a picture next to the modern day locomotive. So the steam locomotive in around 1930, and it will dissolve into the modern diesel locomotive. In McKinley Park itself, taking people through the park on buses is nothing new. They've been doing that for a long time. And we have a side-by-side of one of the buses from the 50s with a modern day bus. And if you look in the background, there's a cabin that is still there, the same as it was before. And only the buses and the people have changed. Everything else is still the same. While we were there, so many people ride the buses, and they all get out and they all put their cameras up. It's like a race. Who can have the biggest lens? So look at the camera on that one. Finally, when you're at the railroad depot, it's all about the train arriving, and people have to photograph it. And the train has arrived, and now they're going to unload passengers, and most of the people you see in this image are waiting to get on it. Now we're going to go to Healy. Healy is famous for coal, and today there's the Usabelli coal mine. In the early days, the coal mine was at Suntrana, which is near present-day Healy. And when you walk back in there, you can still find seams of coal there in the rocks. And these two images show this. I sent the one picture to my kids and told them that I was Christmas shopping. So now we have a then and now of Healy, roughly the same spot, side by side, in the 1920s. This picture I really like. before Usabelli, it was the Healy River Coal Corporation. And this is a railroad car. So it's an old Model T that's been fitted to drive on the rails. They mined the coal and hauled it out and distributed it by rail, just like they do today. And here we see a photo of where the coal mines were located. And the part that that came out of the side of the hill, it was an underground mine, was called the tipple. And that's where the coal came across on the conveyor belts and was offloaded into the rail cars. So we see the side-by-side here. And then here's the blend of the two. And you can see they were just building the infrastructure for the Healy coal mine. This is an early picture of it. The next images we have side by side are images of the tipple once it was completed. And you can see the railroad tracks running underneath it. There's a lot more buildings and mining paraphernalia around. And it's kind of sad that it's all gone. The tipple, the last remnants of the tipple were removed about 10 years ago, I understand. And here it is blended together. So here we see the old coal seams, and I have two pictures that have kids in them. And I realized that they were taken from this one spot. So here's the today picture, and I will dissolve in and add the two photos of the kids. In the photo on the right, the boy standing on the far right is holding a ground squirrel, and his mortality is unknown. Now we have another side-by-side that shows a really good, clean image of the tipple. And here's a blended image of the Healy coal mine at its height. Now we're going to move up the Parks Highway to Nenana. We have this image of Nenana looking south. This side-by-side comparison, you can see that Nenana was a pretty good-sized place, and this photo was taken around 1920. It's amazing to think that all of that mushroomed up in just a few years, like 3 or 4. On the right-hand side of the picture was the Alaska Engineering Commission buildings, and the Alaska Engineering Commission are the ones that built the Alaska Railroad. This is another side-by-side taken of the Nenana waterfront from a different angle. As we bring up the old photo, you can see there's some boats along the waterfront. You can see the waterfront is shored up with pilings. And this shows all the Engineering Commission buildings. And if you look out towards more towards the center of the photograph on the left, you'll see some steam coming up out of a locomotive that's traveling on the railroad tracks. The railroad tracks are still there, the streets are still there, but everything else has changed. And then we have the blended image, so you can see the then with the now. Here we have the Nenana waterfront looking east in the summer of 1916, and there's a steamboat there with a couple of barges, and you have warehouse buildings along the waterfront. So now we'll blend it. And it looks really interesting to see all of that together like that, blending the different times in one photo. If you go upriver from that point up to near where the Mears Bridge is, that's where the old riverboat dry docks used to be. They hauled the boats out to work on them. And here you see it side by side. We'll bring up the old photo. In that photo, you can see riverboats and a barge. in the dry docks waiting for the ice to go out. We'll dissolve into today, and you can see that there's nothing there now. It's all gone. In this blended image, it gives you a good idea of just exactly where those dry docks were located. Now we'll look at downtown Nenana. And we're looking right down the main street, and at the end of the street is the railroad depot, which is a single-story building. And you can see a lot of multi-story wooden structures lining the street. When we dissolve to today, you see a lot is gone, but the old railroad depot is still down at the end of the street, except now it has an upper story on it, which was added after the previous picture was taken. And now we have another picture of downtown Nenana taken during the 1940s. And as you can see, there's a lot of change. There's less commerce in Nenana than what there used to be. Now we have the Nenana Depot in a photo taken June 1926, and it was a special excursion train called the Midnight Sun Excursion, packed with tourists, I'm sure. And we dissolve into today, and you can see the new upper story on the building, and you can see the Mears Bridge in the background. Nenana is famous for this being the site of the Golden Spike Ceremony. On July 15, 1923, President Warren G. Harding was in Alaska, and he had the distinct honor of driving the Golden Spike that completed the Alaska Railroad. To commemorate that event, they put a sign up right by where the train enters the Mears Bridge on a rocky hill. Dissolving out to today, you see there's no sign, it's just woods. Here's another version of that sign when it was first erected, and I'm guessing that this was probably in the 1930s or 40s. There's not any brush or anything growing around it. Now we'll dissolve to today. Another view of it. Here we have a picture of President Harding driving the actual Golden Spike, and the crowd gathered around him. Now we'll dissolve to today, and all you see is Mark. To get that shot, you can see I have Mark out there on the tracks, and I'm trying to position him like President Harding was, and I'm holding the image up in front of the camera lens so that I can try to get it. Here's Harding actually driving the Spike, a little action shot. We'll dissolve out to today. The crowd disappears, and there's only sad Mark looking at the spot. Now we're going to talk about the Mears Memorial Bridge. It's named for Colonel Frederick Mears of the Alaska Engineering Commission, and he was one of the people in charge of building the Alaska Railroad. The bridge was completed in 1923, and it featured an impressive 700-foot span, one of the longest single truss-type bridges in the world. So this bridge was built in Pennsylvania, and they loaded it up, and it traveled through the Panama Canal and was brought all the way around up the Pacific coast, loaded on the Alaska Railroad in 23 or 24 cars, and the pieces brought, and the bridge was constructed. Quite a feat. So these next images are going to show the construction of the Mears Bridge. And you can see here that September 8th, 1922, they were pouring the concrete abutments, which was the first step. Then they had to wait for the ice to come, and they built false work, which are wooden trestles that are going to hold up the bits and pieces while they construct this steel bridge. Here we see the completed bridge with all the false work taken out from underneath of it. And this image shows the bridge today. Now we're going to go further upriver to Chinatown. China was located just downriver from where the mouth of the Chena River dumps into the Nenana River. It's at the Chena River Wayside Campground off of Chena Pump Road. So these two pictures are a side by side. As you can see, when I bring up the old photo from 1908, Chena was a thriving community. Fairbanks and Chena were rivals. Fairbanks won out and Chena went away, as you can see. And here we have the blended image, the old with the new. Next, we're going to do the Nenana Valley Railroad trestle. This trestle was bridge number 5 for the Nenana Valley Railroad, and it was on the part of the railroad. The railroad ran out to Gilmore, and it also ran along the Elliott Highway, over Ridgetop, and then down to Olness and Vault and up the Chattanooga River Valley to Chattanooga. Trestle number 5 bridge was located in an area just off of the Elliott, where the Elliott Highway is today, between Fox and Hilltop. Next up is Chena Hot Springs. Chena Hot Springs in the old days was called Big Chena, and it was developed fairly early on. It was a playground for Fairbanksans, especially those with rheumatism. They would go up and spend time and soak. And now this is a shot. There's a row of little log cabins that sits near the pool building. And there's been a row of log cabins there for a long time. I don't think the modern ones are the originals. I think that they would replace them with roughly the same size buildings, though. So here we see these cabins. It's a winter shot. And now we're going to blend a scene from the past with it. This image is of Mark standing on the trail that leads down to the end of the pool house, and it shows the cabins in the background. And it dissolves into the picture of a man giving another man a haircut with those cabins lined up in the same place. And finally, we can't leave Chena Hot Springs without getting a picture of the DC-6 that landed there on a lick and a prayer. And we found 2 ice glasses from the Ice Museum in the ditch nearby where the plane was, so we put them in the picture too, a parting shot. Now we're going to go up the Steese Highway, just north of Fox, where Felix Pedro made his discovery of gold in the Nenana Valley. These 2 images side by side are the area where that discovery claim was located. In this original image, taken in 1913, you can see that there was a lot of mining activity going on, and it was all hand mining. They didn't have equipment other than boilers and winches. And here's the blend of both of the images together. Now we're going to go up the Steese Highway where the bridge crosses the Chattanooga River. And in the 20s and 30s, the bridge was built, and it was a wooden bridge, and it was in a different location than today's bridge, as you can see in these side-by-side views. And here's the image that combines both of them together. One of the features along the Steese Highway is the Davidson Ditch. And the Davidson Ditch was constructed using steam power. And this steam shovel was a shovel from the Panama Canal. And it was used to help dig the ditch. They didn't have modern hydraulics in those days. And this steam shovel ran on coal. So here you see it dissolving into today. That steam shovel is still around with us today, and that very steam shovel is sitting at Pioneer Park. And it's 100 years old, more than 100 years old. So now we're going to do the town of Chattanooga. We went to try to see where the old town was. There isn't hardly anything there, but we did find a boiler, and Mark's campaign hat makes a nice silhouette on the side of the boiler. And here I'll bring up the entire picture and you can see him standing there next to it. We used the drone to get the footage for the town site. And while we were out there, we found a couple of artifacts that were sitting near the base of a birch tree. So here you see the original picture showing Chattanooga around 1920. And you see the drone image that we took and dissolve into today's image, and you can see that there's really nothing left of the town, but you can see the railroad grade going off in the distance. So now I'll bring back part of the old picture and lay it over the new one, and you can see in the blended image that it's all gone now. Also at Chattanooga is the F.E. Gold Camp. And while we had the drone out there, we took some images of that. And then we went to check out the gold dredge. Now this photo I took of the gold dredge in the summer of 2008. And here's another image I took that day, and this one I had to stitch these photos together because at that time I didn't have the software to do it automatically. Here we see what the gold dredge looks like today. And the dredge burned in August of 2013. It's a terrible loss. However, it's also at the same time very interesting. As we get a better look inside, you can see all the inner workings of how this dredge worked. And when the wind blows, it rattles the tin from one end of it to another. Mark took this very interesting overhead shot with the dredge, and it kind of looks like an old dinosaur laying in a pond. We're going to finish off with Fairbanks historical condemnation. I use the word condemnation because it's the opposite of restoration. And we haven't done a very good job of saving our historical buildings in Fairbanks. Here we see the E.T. Barnett home. In 1904, this house was the nicest house in Fairbanks. It was built by the founder of our city. By 1959, it was run down. It was still salvageable, but the land was sold to a church. They wanted to move their building from 3rd Avenue to the site, so the Barnett home was dismantled and hauled off onto College Road. So when the building was torn down and the logs were hauled to College Road, they were over at a tourist place called the Caribou. Part of it was Caribou. I can't remember the last part of the name. And some college kids stole a bunch of logs from there. And I think they stole the logs from the E.T. Barnett home, and they burned them at Starvation Gulch Fire. So now we're going to dissolve, and here you see the first Church of the Christ Scientists that sits on that site today. This building was moved from 3rd Avenue when they were doing urban renewal. And so it was relocated on the site of the Barnett home. We can't talk about this without talking about the loss of the Masonic Temple. It was one of our iconic historic buildings. It was a favorite of everybody. And here we see a side-by-side of the Masonic Temple in the 1980s and what it looked like after it met its fate. Now we'll do a blend of the two. All that's left of the Masonic Temple is the front steps. And that building was built in 1906. So here is a short video clip that shows a drone flight flying over the destroyed Masonic Temple. You can see that the church is probably enjoying a little more sunlight on that side of the building. And all of that went to the landfill. All of that history, all of that pile of rubble that had been with us since 1906. I think we could have done better. So we're going to end with your ongoing financial support is needed to preserve what is left of our history. Please consider donating to our local preservation projects and our museums. And thank you for giving me your time.
Up the street beside the red neon light, it's where I met my baby on a hot summer's night. He was the tender and I ordered a beer. It's been 40 years and I'm still sat here. Can't you see the sun sinking fast? And just like they say, nothing good ever lasts. Well, go on then and kiss it goodbye, but hold on to your lover, 'cause your heart's gonna die. Go on then and say goodbye to our town, to our town. Can't you see the sun's going down on our town, on our town? Good night. It's where I met my baby and I had my first kiss. I've walked up Main Street in the cold morning mist. Over there is where I bought my first car. I turned it over once, now it won't go far. Can't you see the sun sinking fast? And just like they say, nothing good ever lasts. Well, go on then and kiss it goodbye, but hold on to your love, because your heart's gonna die. Go on then and say goodbye to our town, to our town. Can't you see the sun's going down on our town, on our town? Good night.
Thank you, Joan and Mark, for sharing a wonderfully unique view of Fairbanks, and thanks to KUAC for hosting the Discover Alaska Lecture Series. If you would like to see this lecture again, or to let others know about it, you can find it on the website uaf.edu/summer/events. Join us for next week's lecture with Jeff Curry, who will present climate change impacts on our Department of Transportation, infrastructure, and the challenges and adaptations facing Alaska's DOT. I'm Althea St. Martin, and thank you for joining us as we discover Alaska. Have a wonderful evening and stay safe.